Terry Morin's Hoosiers have a deep roster this upcoming season, but which one of those players will step into Grace Berger's starting lineup spot?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Hope you all made it through the week. You are Locked On Hoosiers right now, though, the one and only daily IU podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Wherever you guys may be tuning in from, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Overcast, whatever it may be. Appreciate you guys for making us your first listen every day. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. We talked on Thursday's episode about the men's basketball team and intriguing lineups they had. And one of the first things we talked about was the starting lineup, because we know, barring some drastic change, what that starting lineup is going to look like. We don't have that luxury when it comes to the women's starting lineup. So I thought today we're going to talk about a couple lineups that I'm interested in, but we could start today by looking at the possibilities of who could step into the starting lineup this upcoming season. We know four of the players, again, barring some drastic change, that are going to start for the Hoosiers this year. Chloe Moore-McNeil, Sydney Parrish, Yarden Garzon, Mackenzie, Holmes. I would say those are about as locked in as you can get when it comes to starters. There's one other spot open. Theoretically, you could go a number of ways with this. You could potentially go with another forward. IU's roster is pretty guard heavy, though, and that's where I imagine they're going to go with this. And in that sense, there's a lot of players that could be that fifth starter for this team. I would say right now, the leader in the clubhouse is Sara Scalia, the sixth-year senior, I believe, returning to Indiana. We mentioned earlier in the week she had a bit of an injury scare in Greece, but tweeted out that everything's going to be fine. Looks like she will be all set to go. She's only a fifth-year senior, but she, I think, is probably the leader in the clubhouse. She started 14 games last season when Grace Berger was injured. So there's a track record of a five-person lineup with Scalia and the other four starters having played together. So there's a familiarity there that is going to give her a huge leg up. And so I think that's why she's a leader in the clubhouse. I think that her skill set would fit well into this starting lineup as a shooter. IU has a couple players that can knock down shots in that lineup, but there's a reputation that Scalia has. Even though she struggled last season, there's a reputation she has as a shooter that's going to create gravity on the floor and open things up even more. So I think she's going to get it. I think she's going to get the first crack at it. I think on the first game of the season, I would not be surprised if Scalia is the starter. Now, she did start last season, and she started even before Grace Berger went down. It was Sydney Parrish who came off the bench initially, but once Grace returned back healthy, Scalia's shooting slump led to her being the one to come off the bench. If she's struggling to shoot the ball, or if Terry Morin thinks that her kind of scoring punch can be useful off the bench, then I think there is an argument for her to be the sixth person and be the first one off the bench. You can still close games with her, and she can still play as many minutes as she typically would, but there are other options available for Indiana this upcoming season. Lexus Bargesser is someone that I think is going to get a chance to certainly make an impression, and she started in Greece. I wouldn't put much into that because Mackenzie Holmes didn't play. Garzon didn't start the first game. There was a lot of shifting around, and I don't put a lot into the lineup or the rotation at all, but she did start and she played a fair amount. So She's someone that played last season as a freshman a decent amount, and we've talked about this before. Terry Morin doesn't always play freshmen a lot, and Garzon kind of shifted that in a completely different direction, but the fact that she played Bargesser as much as she did, I think, shows how much kind of faith that she has in her moving forward. So I think that it's likely that you're probably one of Scalia and Bargesser is going to be the starter, the other the first guard off the bench, and theoretically could go either way. If I had to pick right now, I would say it would probably be Scalia who is going to start the first game of the season. There are two other options that could be interesting in Lenee Beaumont and Jules LaMendola, the two freshman guards. Like I said, we've seen Terry Morin start freshmen before. She did it last season. It's not the norm, certainly, but there is something that those two bring that neither Scalia or Bargesser bring, and that's some size. We know how much Terry Morin likes big guards. Scalia and Bargesser are the two shortest players listed on the roster. I'm not saying that should be some type of decisive tiebreaker, but there are benefits there. I thought both of them looked good playing in Greece. Again, a lot of grains of salt with the competition level and all of that, but I thought the two of them fit well and looked like they were going to adapt well to IU's offense. I think both of them are going to get a lot of minutes this season, whether it's as a starter or off the bench. I think they're a pretty distant third right now, either one of them, but it wouldn't shock me if on the first night of the season, one of them is in the starting lineup. Something to keep in mind. The two of them, again, are going to play this season. How much and whether it's as a starter remains to be seen. If I had to guess right now, it would be Scalia as a starter, Bargesser, the first person off the bench, LaMendola and Beaumont getting a lot of minutes off the bench as well. But we'll see how that plays out. Let me know who you would start in that fifth spot. Would it be Scalia and her shooting? Would it be Bargesser allowing Scalia to kind of be a scoring punch off the bench? That is the other thing. If Scalia is your starter, you have a pretty inexperienced bench behind that starting lineup. Bargesser is a sophomore. Beaumont, LaMendola are freshmen. Henna Sandvik is a sophomore. So not a ton of experience there, but should that matter when it comes to the starting lineup? Should you just simply put your five best players out there? Let me know what you guys think down below. There are some intriguing lineups that I'm interested in seeing with the Hoosiers. They can go two very different ways this season, and I think they have some versatility that they didn't have last season. Not that that's necessarily better or worse, but it is different. So we'll look at a smaller lineup the Hoosiers could put out there this season and what that could look like here in just a moment. Before we do that, let's talk about the sponsor of today's episode, eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. You guys saw that with the Hoosiers when they won the Big Ten title last year. That starting lineup last year was an absolute, by the end of the season, they were a well-oiled machine. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Big thanks to you guys for making us your first listen every single day. Everydayers, you guys will have heard us talk about the men's team earlier this week as well as recruiting. There's a lot of recruiting news that I am cobbling together that we will have next week as well. So be sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss that weekly Wednesday recruiting roundup that we do. A fun little nugget that came across today, or early on Thursday morning, I should say. Noah Vonleh, who is a Hoosier that not everybody loves after his time in Bloomington, his one-and-done season. He signed with the Shanghai Sharks in China, the Chinese Basketball Association. Why is that relevant? Because he will be teaming up with point guard Yogi Ferrell on the Sharks. Yogi had a strong season last year, and China is a very popular league. So, excuse me. So Ferrell and Vonleh are going to be teaming up once again for the Sharks. Obviously, we're IU teammates in 2013-14. I don't know how much that excites the IU fan base. Probably not the two IU teammates you want to see team back up. I know that is mixed feelings at the least for Vonleh, but a fun little nugget nonetheless on Thursday. Let's talk about a small ball lineup for the IU women's basketball team. Something they didn't have last year was a realistic alternative to Mackenzie Holmes. She played 33 and a half minutes last season. Grace Berger played 34. That was too many, and we saw it wear Holmes down by the end of the season. She wasn't healthy come tournament time. I think there is going to be a far greater emphasis on not having her play as many minutes as she did last year, 953, and keeping her healthy for the end of the season so that she can be ready to help carry IU through the tournament. So on that note, I think there's an interesting small ball lineup possibility. We just mentioned a couple players who could step into that. Small ball isn't necessarily size. I mean, small ball does insinuate that it is a smaller lineup, but it's also kind of how you play as well. It's a lineup predicated on three-point shooting and spacing and things like that. I think a lineup the Hoosiers could put out this season is Sara Scalia, Sydney Parrish, Chloe Moore-McNeil, Yarden Garzon, and someone who's going to be kind of an X factor in some ways this year, Sharnecce Currie-Jelks, who is the transfer from UT Martin, forward 6'2", can play a little bit of center, can play a little bit of the four. There's been the idea that she could stretch her game out a little bit. She is athletic, can play away from the paint, and so that's not to say Mackenzie Holmes can't, but this is also just kind of like an alternative lineup that IU didn't have last season. IU hasn't had that with Holmes the last couple of seasons. It's hard to do, and you do want Holmes on the floor. She's your best player. You want her on the floor a lot, but there's a fine line, and I think Indiana realized that the hard way last season when they crossed that line, because ultimately you want Holmes available to avoid a second-round upset in the NCAA tournament. This lineup does hinge on Currie-Jelks just being a strong player. Nothing would indicate she's not. It is going to be a jump from UT Martin to the Big Ten, but she was another one that we perhaps didn't talk about much from the Greece trip that showed some things and has me optimistic and excited about what it could be, what it could look like with her next season. The strengths of this lineup, it's a legit lineup that could work without Holmes. And I think that is something the Hoosiers should explore, whether it is a small ball lineup, whether it's a lineup with Lily Meister on the floor, whatever that may be. The Hoosiers need to have alternatives so that you don't need Mackenzie Holmes playing 33 and a half minutes per game in Big Ten play. I don't think they want that either. So I wouldn't be surprised if Terry Morin is trying some things out throughout the season and figuring out what her options could be at that position. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the type of lineup she throws out. You could mix in some other pieces on the perimeter. We mentioned Lexus Bargesser. She could play some as a more of a point guard and let Scalia play off the ball and be more of a shooter. You could have either of Beaumont or LaMendola playing on the perimeter a little bit and go super small. Both LaMendola and Beaumont are 6'1". They looked bigger than that in Greece, so maybe you can play kind of a 4-guard around Currie-Jelks lineup as well and really go small and really, really play fast and try to punish teams with your speed and your ability to really space out the floor and beat players off the dribble. But I think there's a small ball option there that the Hoosiers haven't had with Holmes off the floor in the last couple of seasons. So I'm really interested to see how Currie-Jelks adapts to the Hoosiers in the Big Ten and a kind of higher level of basketball, because if she can adapt well and kind of hit the ground running a little bit, there's a lot of interesting options with her on the floor in a lot of different ways. And so I would be interested in seeing something with, or a lot of, not just something, a lot of things, a lot of lineups with her as a center and alleviating some of that burden on Holmes this season. The flip side to a small ball lineup is a kind of bigger bully ball lineup. And again, Indiana could do that this season, and that's not an option that they've had or they had last season. We'll talk about the flip side to this and kind of a bigger lineup that the Hoosiers could put on the floor. We'll do that in a moment. So the opposite of a small ball lineup is maybe a little bit more of I don't want to say antiquated, that has a bad connotation, but a more traditional old school bully ball lineup where you have a couple of post players and things look like they were played in the 90s, something closer to what the IU men's team had been the last couple seasons with Trace and Race in their lineups. You could put something out there. And again, this hinges on Currie-Jelks. And I'm not saying that IU certainly could be good without her being a big part of it. She is a certain X factor that would allow IU to do a lot of things. And I know we mentioned her in both lineups in this. If she does play well, then Indiana has a lot of ways it can go. Now, if she doesn't play well, then Indiana has players like Lily Meister, who looked great against Miami. But if she is playing well, I'd be interested in seeing some type of lineup where you have Lenee Beaumont out there, 6'1". You have Sydney Parrish out there, 6'2". You have Garzon playing the 3. She's 6'3". You have Currie-Jelks out there. She's 6'2". You have Mackenzie Holmes out there. She's 6'3". Everyone's 6'1" or taller, and multiple players that can really punish you. And again, this isn't an alternative IU had last season. They had it a little bit with Alexa Goulbe a couple seasons ago. She wasn't as much of a post player. She had it in her game. She drifted around the perimeter a little bit more, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of what Currie-Jelks does a little bit too. Her and Holmes both aren't the type of players who have to be around the basket and in the paint to have success. Holmes is a great passer out of the high post and out at the top of the key. Currie-Jelks is someone that has some athleticism to her as well. So I think this is a lineup that could work. There are two players that really could make this a tough lineup. One of those being Currie-Jelks, the other being Garzon. I don't know that she played much 3 last season. I would have to look. I can't imagine she did. I don't know many lineups that didn't have her as a 4 last season, but she obviously has the shooting to play on the perimeter. It would be more on the defensive end and making sure she could hold up on that side of the floor. But if she can, then this offers another alternative for Indiana that could help them match up with teams differently, could help them punish teams differently. The strengths are this being a nice alternative to a small ball lineup. There's a possibility you could throw out both of these lineups in the same game. You go super small, you play 4 guards around Currie-Jelks maybe, and then later on in a quarter later, you have Currie-Jelks surrounded or as a 4 with a whole bunch of size around them. It makes Indiana tougher to match up against just having these lineups. One of the other keys is there's still ball handling on the perimeter in this lineup. Beaumont is still a ball handling guard. Parrish, still a ball handling guard. Garzon, still a ball handling forward. Showed some flashes last season of having some nice vision, and I'd be really interested to see her have the ball more this season. But that's 3 players that can play make, and we mentioned Mackenzie Holmes' passing as well. You can cut off the ball with her having the ball in the high post. So this is a lineup that still has some versatility to it. You aren't beholden to playing 2 posts and 3 guards that are 16 feet away from the basket and throw the ball into the paint and watch them work. There are other ways to punish teams with this lineup, but it's interesting that Indiana has a couple of ways theoretically they could put lineups on the floor that could punish teams. And so I think that's one of the things I'm excited about with this Indiana team. Even though it's a pretty guard-heavy roster, they're not all the same type of guards, and Indiana still has versatility on this roster. Again, they have versatility in ways that they didn't last season. That offers a new dynamic to the team. Will it be better? Will it be worse? We'll find out, but it's different, and that's exciting, especially when you're in the offseason kind of thinking about ways IU could be different and maybe improved in this upcoming season. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every single day. Thank you all for the support this week. It's been another awesome week. If you guys missed anything, we talked men's basketball lineups. We talked recruiting. On Wednesday, we discussed a lot of football. At the beginning of the week, there's been nothing about the quarterback battle other than it's still nobody's separated themselves. So we'll try to get you any more updates next week on that quarterback battle. As I said, we have some recruiting updates as well. And IU is starting to play some sports. Soccer is getting underway, women and men's soccer. We'll try to get you caught up on that next week as well. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave a quick rating and review. All of that stuff. Appreciate you guys as always. Hope everybody has a great Friday. Head into the weekend well. And as always, LEO.